What would you regard as essential skills required from translators for efficiency to work in an office?
Well, the skills for a translator to be operating in an office are very clear. There is a series of mandatory skills. These ones are covered in the ISO 17100 standard, quality standard for translation industry in place right now, which are translation competence, linguistic competence, terminology competence, cultural competence, uh, technological competence, and domain competence. All these are extremely important and very basic for the day-to-day translation work. But apart from that, we have to take into account that in an office we are interacting with other people. So it is very important to have these extra linguistic competence, so-called soft skills. So these are very commendable, and they are more difficult to learn because they are implicit more or less in the way somebody behaves. So let's say that according to my experience, we have two sides. One, the linguistic skills, or linguistic competences, and the extra linguistic competences or soft skills.
What would you require as essential skills to be developed by the training institutions, and what are the ones that can be improved in the office?
Well, this answer is connected to the previous one because if we are requiring all these linguistic and extra linguistic competences in an office, the most logical thing is that all of them, mainly the mandatory one, the linguistic competences, are learned in the university. Why? Because they are absolutely necessary for a translator to be operating. Of course, they are basic, but we have to try to simulate a real scenario in the lectures. So it would be very interesting to provide some information or practices regarding teamwork, stress tolerance, just to cover some deadlines and very stringent deadlines, some other related competences that have to do in the relationship with the professional environment. So, in my opinion, more or less, universities should reproduce a real world scenario. Though we understand also that there are some more theoretical subjects that also must be present there in the syllabus.
Apart from internship, what cooperation schemes can you suggest or imagine between universities and translation offices to better prepare students?
Well, this is a good question. Why? Because normally we can experience some disconnection between industry and university. So this project, in fact, is an attempt to bridge this gap as far as possible. So taking all this into account, we should recommend that universities should go to industry specialists or practitioners so that they could go to lectures to explain what is really happening in an office or in industry. Why? Because when translators go out after the graduation, sometimes they are a bit lost because they are not connected to real problems. We're talking about costs, about deadlines, about quality concepts, and all that is very present, or even to work now these days in a scenario with machine translation or post editing or other disciplines related to languages, not only necessarily translation, because we can talk, for instance, of content management, of I don't know, tasks related to all preparation of files with formats and all these things. So it's a good thing to that students should be informed about the updates in industry and the best ways to be connected to practitioners, go in there, and also just the other way around. Another possibility is the lecturers or trainers go into companies to see what is happening, even with the accompanied by students, so that they could see how everything works in an office.
What would you regard as essential skills required from translators for becoming efficient in project management?
Well, in the first question, I was talking about what is considered as necessary for translators to be in an office. In this case, we're talking about the same, but with project managers. Well, more or less the same. One of the typical questions when I'm giving lectures on project management is whether or not a PM, a project manager, should be a former translator. And my answer is always yes. It is not mandatory, but it's absolutely commendable. Not only that, but also the idea of being a translator before, and also, if possible, a reviser. Why? Because they have been touching all the possibilities before management, and they can be very proactive because they could suffer as translators and or revisers. In fact, I recommend to have suffered a lot before being a project manager, because that way you can anticipate to be in advance of potential problems. So that's the idea, to have a real overview of all processes and procedures, of tasks, pre-production, production and post-production, so that we can work together better. You can see when some cases when you're dealing with PMs who cannot understand very easily what your problem is, probably because first they didn't work as translators, so perhaps they cannot understand some of the problems that a translator would understand very easily.
What are the most frequent challenges within project management?
The main challenges in project management are interrelated. For me, they are three. What I usually call the core variables. That it's quality, not necessarily of quality of translation, but quality of processes, deadlines, and costs. All of them are interrelated, they are very close altogether, in such a way that if you move, let's think of a triangle, or with all equal sides. If you move one of the corners, the effect on the other two corners will probably be negative. So the main challenge for a project manager is to be able to balance all these core variables. And apart from that, take into account that they have to deal with deadlines mainly. Let's think, for instance, of a project manager working in an office. The first day, he is dealing with 5 projects, and this day he or she has to deliver 2, so we have 3. But the next day, he or she could have 5 more, so we have 8. Perhaps you can deliver 6. In this case, you will have other 3 or 4 or 5, and this is constantly moving from day to day. So this is a main challenge, just to be able to cope with all this, because we are constantly moving, and all these projects can be completely different. We can talk about a project of 10 words, or 100, or 1,000 or 10,000 of 500,000 words at the same time. So take into account, for instance, as a reference, that in our company, Hermes Traducciones, our PMs are dealing with an average of 6 or 7 projects a day. So they have to deal with that.
How does the size of a translation service provider or translation company influence or change the project management procedure?
Obviously, the size of a company is one of the cornerstones of project management. You won't be dealing in the same way with a company with 2 employees than one with 20, for instance. So the way project management is dealt with has to do a lot with the profile of people, because in a company you can find in-house translators or advisors, but in some others you can't find all these resources which are outsourced. So mainly they consist of project managers only. So according to the size, you will have changing. You will have to change the profiles, and this should be very commensurate to the size of the company. So let's think for a moment in a freelancer. A freelancer is a one-person company. He or she will have to do more or less the same tasks as in a big company, but obviously related to this size. But at the end, they have to do the same. So if you are growing up in a company, you are multiplying all problems by n, because you never know. You will have more projects, so you will have more people. You will have specific tools to manage all that. So this is, just to sum up, size is a key factor in project managers, project manager in general.
Which technology or tools do you use for project management? Which are the benefits of using them?
Well, this is very important. Technology, as you know, is one of the these key factors we talked about before. If you check one atlas of the existing technology for translators, you will see a A4 size page, all covered with icons representing all these tools. So we have many type of tools. We are not going to go in depth with that, but we can mention basically all the CAD tools everybody knows. And the most important thing for project management is the PMS, that is the the project management system, such as Plunet, XDRF, Prochamos, or some others that are used every day in companies and in industry, and which are absolutely fundamental for PMs. Why? As an instance, when we install our Plunet-based PMS around 10 years ago, the productivity of our PMs increased nearly 40% after 4 months. So as you can guess, this is extremely important, because we have to deal with many things, with many projects, with many information, many details, multiple data coming from different sources. So this is absolutely necessary.
What kind of training, for instance in-house courses, does your organization offer for translators to improve skills necessary for this field?
The type of training we provide our in-house people is related to our needs. First of all, according to our experience, when we hired somebody coming from other companies, we decided to do it in another way, because we were not very successful with these experiences, as I said, because those people were trained in a different way. It wasn't neither worse or better. It was in another different way. We work in a very specific way from the very beginning, because we decided to take interns, and those interns were working with us for at least 3 months, in which we realized if they were interesting for our company or not. If so, they were contracted as employees, first as translators, and in the future they could be promoted to revisors, and from there to PMs. And for that, instead of giving a lot of information and training from the very beginning, the very first day, that the translators were overwhelmed with all this information, what we do was taking step by step with a very customized training according to his or her knowledge of the processes. First of all, they have to be trained in our ISO certification, so that they could know what is happening in the company, to have an overview of it, and from there we pass to start with our CAD tools, and in more or less 3 or 4 months they were trained by experienced translators, or senior translators, that were supervising all the things that they were doing. They were revised constantly in a specific way, very thorough way, so that they could see what they are doing wrong and to be able to improve. So after that, we could assess all the work they were doing in three different values, that it was delivery, deadlines, and quality of translations. And according to that, we made decisions on what they would have to improve, but always taking into account all this information coming from our quality, our internal quality, proprietary quality system. So as it's always customized, but it's always an on the way practice, and on the way learning, so that they could go little by little, and they couldn't feel so overwhelmed, as I said before.
What would you advise to training institutions to help improve students' preparedness for project management?
Well, if you remember, in one of the questions before, I talked about the possibility of practitioners going to universities so that they can show what we are doing every day. So this could be in conjunction with the other type of exercises or practices, that it would be reproducing a real project with deadlines, with quotations, with simulations of the usual work in an office. In that way, I think that students could be accustomed to get familiar with what they will have to do in the future, not only as translators, but also as PMs. So again, I would recommend universities to contact companies, or contact industry or national associations of translation companies, or even translators, so that they could cooperate in adapting the programs, learning programs, to what we really need in industry. So that's my piece of advice.
Do you think that a project manager should have previously worked as a translator and/or as a revisor?
Well, this question has already been answered before. If you remember, I said that it is not compulsory for a PM to be a former translator, but I strongly recommend it, because in that way they could be proactive. So it has been already answered.
Do you think that project managers should devote their work only to project management, or can or should they also do any other tasks?
Well, this is a good question, a very interesting one. One of my recommendations to students, namely future translators or future PMs, is that they should not forget about the tasks of a translator or a reviser when doing project management tasks. Why? Because that way they would be familiar with the new changes and updates in technology, in procedures, and some other things, and that way they could be more in control of all the tasks they have to do. In fact, in my company, in the same way I do with students, I also recommend our PMs to continue to do translation tasks from time to time and when possible, so that they can be fit in this sense and not forget about all these tasks, and that way they could foster the teamwork spirit. So my recommendation is try to forget other tasks.